The bond between Virafong and Gentoni was undeniable, and Gentoni seemed unusually at ease around her grandfather. So much so that she often neglected her husband Nirit, who spent most nights sleeping alone in his room. Things started to take a darker turn. When Gentoni's grandmother, Karinya, and her husband Nirit left the house for work, Virafong and Gentoni were left alone. It was during these moments that unsettling whispers seemed to fill the air, leading to inappropriate and troubling events behind closed doors. Hey there! Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into another chilling real-life story that reminds us just how strange and shocking our world can be. This time, we're heading to the town of Mykdala in Myanmar. The tale we're about to share is fascinating, centered on a family torn apart by conflict, where the children left home, only for the story to take an unexpected twist years later with the arrival of grandchildren who had grown up far away. So, what really happened? What's the full story behind this gripping case? Stick with us, because we're about to dive right into all the juicy details. Let's get started. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. It helps us bring more stories like this to you. Alright, let's get into it. This is the story of a woman named Netcha, born in 1977. She was the eldest of two siblings, with a younger sister, Preacher, who was 8 years her junior. Netcha had always been a bit of a tomboy and tough to deal with. She went through school but, unfortunately, her rebellious streak got the better of her. By the time she was just 15, her social life had spiraled out of control, and she found herself in a situation she wasn't ready for. She was pregnant. Scared and overwhelmed, Netcha hid at her teacher's house, fearing her parents' reaction. And it's no wonder she was afraid. Her parents were strict and highly disciplined. Her father, Virafong, was a civil servant working for the Mandalay city government in the food department. Her mother, Karinya, was a nurse at a prestigious hospital in Mandalay. Both were deeply religious and valued order and responsibility in their household. When her parents discovered her pregnancy, they were furious and kicked her out of the house. Netcha ended up staying with a relative for a while, but the shame and her boyfriend's refusal to take responsibility drove her to leave Mandalay altogether. In 1993, she moved to Myanmar, invited by a friend who helped her look for work. Her parents tried to find her, asking around and checking with relatives, but this was 1993. Communication wasn't what it is today. There were no cell phones, and landlines were a luxury not everyone had. Eventually, they lost all contact with her. Fast forward to 2011, her father, Virafong, took early retirement due to health issues. The family moved to Mykdala, where her mother, Karinya, returned to work as a nurse at the local hospital. By 2013, she retired at the age of 55 and started volunteering at a nursing home in the area. Meanwhile, her father stayed at home and occasionally helped her brother Preacher, who had been selling cell phones in Mykdala's traditional market since 2015. Back in Myanmar, Netcha gave birth to her son, Gentoni, and worked in a paint factory to make ends meet. She eventually married a man named Saphon, but their marriage ended in 2002 when he secretly married another woman, leaving Netcha to raise Gentoni alone. Over the years, she married 2 more times, but both relationships ended in divorce and left her without children. As Gentoni grows older, Netcha decides to remain single and focus on her life and her daughter. This is just the beginning of Netcha's story. Stay tuned as we reveal the twists and turns of her life and what happens when the past and present collide. In 2016, Netcha sadly passed away from cancer. Before she left, she gave her daughter, Gentoni, a final wish: to find her grandparents in Mandalay so she wouldn't be alone. Along with her heartfelt message, Netcha left a photo of a notebook with an address that pointed to her father's workplace, the Food Government Office. But life had other plans, and Gentoni didn't act on her mother's request right away. In June 2018, at the age of 25, she married Nirit, a 27-year-old working at a large insurance company. For a while, things went well. Gentoni briefly worked at a supermarket, and the couple settled into married life. However, by 2020, the pandemic turned their world upside down. Neerat was laid off when his company downsized, leaving him unemployed. The couple struggled to find work as businesses shut down, especially during the hard-hit months of February to April 2020. To make matters worse, Neerat's sister often came by asking for money and food, draining their already dwindling savings. That's when Gentoni remembered her mother's wish for her to reconnect with her grandparents. With her husband's support, they decided to leave Myinjian for Mandalay, hoping to find her grandparents. Gentoni remembered that her grandfather, Virafong, had worked as a civil servant and her grandmother, Karinya, had been a nurse. Surely, they thought, they would have the means to help. At the end of April 2020, they made their way to Mandalay and began asking around at the Food Government Office. Unfortunately, they learned that Virafong no longer worked there. He had retired and moved to Maiktala City. Thankfully, the office still had his address and phone number. After confirming it was okay to share the information, they handed it over to the young couple. On May 1, 2020, Gentoni and Neerat arrived in Maiktala, where her grandparents, Virafong and Karinya, were waiting for them at the train station. The reunion was emotional, filled with tears and hugs, especially when they learned about Netcha's passing. The grandparents warmly invited the couple to stay with them, overjoyed to have family close again after so many years. The timing couldn't have been better. Their son, Preacher, was married and no longer living at home, leaving the house quieter than they liked. With Gentoni's arrival, life felt lively once more. 2 weeks later, Neerat landed a job as a security and cleaning officer at a local inn, while Karinya continued working at a nearby nursing home. This left Virafong with plenty of time to bond with his granddaughter. At first, he often took Gentoni to the market to visit Preacher's cell phone shop. Over time though, he preferred staying home, spending hours chatting or watching TV with her. It seemed as though having Gentoni around reminded him of his daughter, Netcha. A piece of her had returned in the form of his granddaughter. Their joy was evident in every interaction. When Karinya came home from work, she'd immediately check on Gentoni. "Have you eaten? What did you do today? Should we buy new clothes this weekend?" The grandparents showered her with affection, often reminiscing about her mother's childhood and insisting she sleep in their room to keep her close. For them, Gentoni's presence was a gift, bringing a renewed sense of happiness and filling their days with laughter and love. It was as though, after years of loss and distance, their family had finally come full circle. Knowing how difficult and lonely Gentoni's childhood had been, her grandmother, Karinya, often encouraged Grandpa Virafong to take her out shopping or for little outings. Over time, her uncle Preacher even gifted her a cell phone. The bond between Virafong and Gentoni grew closer, and it became clear she felt incredibly comfortable around him. In fact, she often seemed to forget her husband, Neerat, who was left sleeping alone in their room most nights. Things started to take a troubling turn. When Karinya and Neerat were away for work, whispers of temptation seemed to creep into the house, and inappropriate events unfolded behind closed doors. This unsettling situation continued for 2 months. By mid-August 2020, Neerat began to notice something was off. His wife acted unusually. Her praises for her grandfather seemed over the top, and their interactions at the dinner table or while watching TV felt off. What struck him the most was that Gentoni had completely stopped sleeping in their room, claiming she missed her grandparents too much and preferred to stay with them. On September 18, 2020, Neerat decided to act on his growing suspicion. He came home unexpectedly at 1 p.m., without informing anyone. As he approached the house, he saw the slippers still on the mat, indicating someone was inside. He tried the front door, but it was locked. Circling to the back, he found that door locked too. Frustrated, he tried peeking through the windows but couldn't see much. Angry and confused, he banged on the front door, calling for someone to open it. For nearly half an hour, no one responded. Finally, the door creaked open, and there stood Gentoni, her hair disheveled, her face sweaty. She forced a surprised smile and asked, "Why are you home so early?" Neerat didn't answer. Instead, he pushed past her and immediately noticed that the bedroom door, which should have been empty, was locked from the inside. He stormed into their own room and accused Gentoni of hiding something. She denied everything, but her nervous demeanor only deepened his suspicions. The following day, September 19, 2020, Neerut decided not to go to work, claiming he didn't feel well. But in reality, he was stewing in frustration and determined to address the situation. While Karinya was at work and Virafong had gone to the market to visit Preacher's shop, Neerut confronted Gentoni directly. He demanded they move out of her grandparents' house and rent a place of their own. This sparked a heated argument. Gentoni adamantly refused to leave, which only made Neerut angrier. Accusations flew, voices rose, and finally, Gentoni broke down. She confessed the unthinkable. There was indeed a relationship between her and her grandfather. Through tears, she admitted she longed for the fatherly love she'd never had, and her grandfather filled that void in her life. What made the revelation even more shocking was her claim that her grandmother, Karinya, was complicit. According to Gentoni, it was Karinya who had subtly suggested the arrangement. She had grown distant from her husband and, unable to meet his needs, had seen this as a solution. Adding to the complexity, Gentoni confessed she had been promised an inheritance in exchange for her cooperation. She even said she was willing to divorce Neerut, who was now jobless and barely making ends meet as a janitor. The confession left Neerut shattered. His world, and the trust he'd placed in his wife, was completely upended in a way he never could have imagined. As the argument heated up, Neerut grew angrier. When Gentoni snapped, "If you want to rent, then go live there yourself," it was the final straw. His rage boiled over, and in a moment of fury, he grabbed her by the neck, squeezing so hard that she couldn't breathe. Tragically, Gentoni's life came to an abrupt end. But it didn't stop there. Consumed by anger, Neerut grabbed a knife from the kitchen and stormed off to the market, intending to confront and kill Virafong, who was at his son's cell phone counter. However, his plan fell apart when Virafong spotted him and managed to run away. The commotion drew the attention of others in the market, who subdued Neerut and handed him over to the Mykdala police. At the station, Neerut confessed everything. His shocking story about his wife and her relationship with her grandfather left everyone speechless. At first, the authorities didn't believe him, dismissing his claims as the ramblings of a frustrated man dealing with a tough job and financial stress. He was even evaluated by a doctor to check his mental state, but the results showed he was perfectly sane. Despite this, the police initially had no evidence to support his accusations, and respected community figure Virafong adamantly denied everything. The investigation dug deeper. The police questioned Karinya, hoping for clarity. She claimed ignorance, repeatedly stating that none of Neerut's claims were true. Interestingly, both grandparents' testimonies were perfectly aligned, leading investigators to suspect they had rehearsed their story. Determined to uncover the truth, the authorities searched the family home and confiscated the cell phones of Gentoni, Virafong, and Karinya. By reviewing their call logs and text messages from the past 2 months, investigators found undeniable proof that Neerut's story was true. Confronted with the evidence, Karinya finally broke down and confessed, corroborating Neerut's claims. The trial was moved from Mykdala to Mandalay due to better facilities, but the proceedings faced constant delays because of the pandemic. For nearly a year, testimonies trickled in until the trial reached its conclusion on August 23, 2021. After hearing all the evidence, the court found Neerut guilty of second-degree murder for taking his wife's life. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 12 years. A month later, both grandparents were charged with perjury and manipulating their granddaughter, Gentoni. They each received a 3-year prison sentence. Tragically, in December 2021, just months after the verdict, Virafong passed away at the age of 67 due to illness, leaving behind a family shattered by the consequences of their actions. What lessons can we learn from this story?